Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of the EQ Lunch and Learn. My name is Mucha Mlingo, and I am your host for today. We're talking about leading with empathy, such an important topic as we have seen, as we've navigated the pandemic that we are still dealing with the after effects of. If you are here for the first time, you are very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We're delighted to have you as we lunch and learn. You provide the lunch as you eat, and we provide the learning. And indeed, today there is a lot of learning that will be had. Please take a moment to comment and let us know your name. Let us know where you are tuning in from, and tell us what you're looking forward to learn as a result of this lunch and learn that we have. I'm really excited about the panelists that I have with me today. I'm always excited about our panelists. Somehow, we always have such a fabulous mix. So, as usual, I'm really excited about our panelists today. Empathy has always been a critical skill for leaders, but it's taking on a new level of meaning and priority. Far from a soft approach, it can really drive significant business results. While you may have always known that demonstrating empathy is positive for people, new research demonstrates its importance for everything from innovation to retention. Great leadership requires a fine mix of all kinds of skills to create the conditions for engagement, happiness, performance. And empathy tops the list of what leaders must get right. Today, we're exploring what empathy is it being soft, how does it contribute to relationships, and how can it impact organizational culture. So there is a lot that we are going to be talking about today. And like I said, if you're joining us, please do share wherever you're joining us from. Give us a comment, give us a shout out, say who you are and where you are logging in from. I today am logged in from Dubai. I am away from home on assignment, and I'm really excited to be able to connect with the PTS wider family. At some point, we will have a time for Q&A, but you don't have to wait for that. Feel free to just type your comments and your questions in the chat. But let me tell you who I am with today. I'm excited to have back with us again Susan, who has become a resident, I think, as far as this program is concerned. Susan has been with us a number of times. Susan is a people enthusiast with a proven track record of understanding, developing, and breathing life into cultures that suits the organization. She has demonstrable strengths in emotional intelligence and leadership. She possesses and utilizes soft power to move the organizational agenda whilst growing the people. There's so much more that you can learn about Susan. If you'd like to connect with her, we'll share her LinkedIn profile so that you can connect with her online. Susan, welcome once again to the session.
Hi, Mucha. It's a pleasure to be here again. I think that's why I keep coming back. It's always so much learning, not just from the audience, but from myself. So I benefit every time that I'm here learning from my fellow panelists. So excited to have a good afternoon.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us again and for always being open when we call you and we say, hey, Susan, can you join us again, especially when we feel as though that, the topic is one that's very pertinent to you. I have also with me today, Lizz Ntonjira. I'm really excited to have Liz on. She's someone that I have stalked online. And so it's great to finally be in a space together with her. Liz is a strategic communications, marketing, and public affairs professional with extensive experience gained within several roles in the public, private, and international development sectors, spanning over 16 years. She has been pivotal in transforming brand perceptions, resulting in driving stakeholder engagements and service product visibility. She is also an award-winning author. Woohoo! And she's a public speaker on a variety of topics. Liz, it's so great to have you here with us. Thank you so much for agreeing to join this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mucha. Hello, Susan. I am joining you from a somewhat very cold Nairobi, but happy to be here and really looking forward to the discussions that are going to happen.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here, Liz. And if you'd like to connect with Liz, again, you can connect with her on LinkedIn. We'll be sharing her profile so that you can learn more about who Liz is. Last but not least, to ensure that there is a diversity of perspectives, I have with us Amani Shayo. I'm really delighted. Amani is also a repeat offender. Amani has been with us before. Amani Shayo is an aspiring consultant and human capital enthusiast, currently working with Empower Limited, a dynamic human capital consulting firm specializing in talent acquisition, learning, personal development, strategic insight, and youth projects. Amani, it's great to have you here. Thank you for saying yes to the invitation and for joining us.
Nice. Thank you very much, Mucha. Thank you very much for bringing me in again for another time. Always an exciting piece of work to come back here and share and also learn from great minds that you normally put on the panel. So I'm looking forward to learn. I'm looking forward to share. And I hope everyone is excited as I am. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much, Amani. And, to be fair, I mean, in agreement with all of you, I also learn a lot from these sessions, right? I come away with so many insights because our panelists are always so amazing. And I know that that will be the same today. I see some shout outs already from some guys who are out there. Oh, Rue, hi, it's so good to have you all the way from Johannesburg. Thanks for joining us. It's awesome to have you online. And Chege. Now, I don't know, because that name sounds like yours, says you have brilliant folks in your panel. I know Susan and I can vouch for her. Awesome. Thank you very much, Anne and Rue, for joining us. If you've joined us, do just give us a shout out in the comments, say hi, and we will definitely say hi back to you. Let us jump right in, and we're talking about leading with empathy. So Amani, since I brought you out last, let me start with you. How would you define empathy?
How will I define empathy? Good. Thank you very much, Mucha. So I think empathy for me, I look at it as just a three-step skill. First of all, is to understand emotions. It can be my emotions or other people's emotions, and to reason with them, and eventually to act. So to act might come in a different forms, but I look at it as just how can I position myself, or rather, how do I be keen to identify what emotions are there, either myself or other people, and then how can I reason with them? Like once I understand them, at some point I can be confused, but I choose now to see how best we can reason with them, and then eventually act.
Yeah.
It might be as simple, but I think for me that what works, and it really came so many times when I think about the word empathy.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. Liz, how about you? How would you define empathy?
I think it's not far off from what Amani has so aptly defined. It's just putting your feet into somebody else's shoes or sliding your feet into their shoe to see how it fits. But also, more book based is, and this is a topic that I'm always really passionate about, because as a leader, you really want to be empathetic around some of the challenges that different people or team members experience. So I think, the reflexive empathy, which is why we cry when we see a baby or a movie, something that you're watching, and that just happens. Everybody is born with that reflexive empathy, where when you're seeing something, and that's why you'll see people revolting or intervening when they see some injustice, right? And then there's the emotional empathy, where you are vicariously experiencing what somebody else is going through. So if Susan is my sister and I know she's going through a really, really difficult time, And I know I'm not directly experiencing what she's going through, but I'm down sad because of that kind of emotional connection that I have with her. And I think the cognitive empathy is, which we practice a lot in the workplace, is where you really put yourself in someone's position and really try to understand where they're coming from. So empathy is quite challenging. It's not an easy thing that a lot of people can acquire. It's something that you have to take time to build for you to have that behavior change. So that's how I would define empathy.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Liz. And I like the way you've kind of broken down the different types of empathy and help us to understand, that you could have cognitive empathy, which is really around, your rational thinking. But there's this element of emotional empathy where you're feeling what someone else is feeling. And I like the point you made is that typically the emotional empathy is around the relationship. So thank you very much for sharing. Susan, your thoughts again, same question. How would you define empathy? What's empathy for you?
Thanks, Mucha. So very similar to what Amani and Liz have said, empathy is seeking to gain an understanding of what someone else is experiencing, what they're feeling, how they're experiencing that emotion, in terms of how it's making them want to respond or react, and how they're thinking through whatever it is, whatever the situation is. So there's the emotion part of it, how they're processing it, and how they want to respond to it.
Fantastic.
And there's a part of it, there's a next stage to it, which can be once you understand and possibly are feeling something similar to the person that you're empathizing with, there could even be a desire or a call to action. You want to intervene in a situation and see how you can contribute to that situation. If it's a problem, how you can solve it. Something interesting Amani said is empathy is not always just empathizing with others. He also said with self, which I wouldn't want anyone to miss out on. So there's empathizing with self, which is where you are also taking the time to understand your own emotion and use that to be able to now, as data, to inform your decision and your action thereafter. Okay, so I think we're having a bit of a technical issue. Maybe I can throw one at you, Liz. One of the things I find as maybe a hindrance to empathy for a lot of people is that they find that empathy is taken as being nice or being soft. What do you think? What has been your experience with empathy? Do you think that it's just a soft, it's a sign of weakness, or how would you address that situation? Muted.
Sorry, I think the most famous statement the past 3 years has been "you are on mute." Sorry.
Yeah, indeed.
So yeah, thank you so much for that question. For me, being empathetic is not being soft at all. Being empathetic is not being generous. Being empathetic is not being nice. Being empathetic is not being benevolent. It's a more challenging skill to adapt or to actually undertake. I think, the reason why I say it's not courtesy is because if I called you, your baby is crying and I really need you to meet a deadline, and tell you, oh, I'm sorry about that, my tone is very courteous. But I tell you, but still, I need that document by 5 o'clock. It's like 4 o'clock, right? So I've been courteous, but I've not really empathized with you. So for me, empathy has a lot more to its inkling. It's about really perspective, understanding, and perspective undertaking. Are you really getting to understand? And if you're a leader with a team, how can you share out duties to ensure, because you have the aerial view of what everybody is dealing with, whether professionally or personally. You have that advantage of being able to say, I think Susan is under a lot of pressure, or I think Amani has, God forbid, a sick baby in hospital, so let's not give him too much work at the moment. That's, for me, is leading with empathy. And I do not think it's a weakness at all. I think it's such a strength to have. Not a lot of us are patient. I mean, this is something, to be very honest, I've over the years had to learn how to be very empathetic, very patient. I've learned this a lot from, my husband, because he sits at the helm of an organization, and often you will hear, it's about deadlines, but then he'll say, there's so many things that surround, externalities that surround this deadline, because you're not dealing with machines, these are humans. How then can you be more empathetic? How can you be more understanding? How can you look at the perspectives of different people? And also understanding personalities and understanding how people work. What are the best timings to work? So definitely, I don't think it's a weakness. It's a strength for you to be able to just play around and think about all those things at the same time. It's a key strength to have.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Liz. And thank you, Susan, for stepping in as I was offline for a brief moment. I really agree with you, Liz, that empathy is a strength, it is not a weakness. Far too often, it has been labeled as a weakness, but I think it's labeled as a weakness by someone who doesn't understand what empathy actually is. I think as long as you understand what empathy is, you'll recognize that it's not a weakness. It takes more effort to be empathic than it does to be abrasive or apathetic. It really does. Because empathy is all around taking perspective. Empathy doesn't mean that you're always going to agree with everything the other person says, right? It doesn't mean that we now no longer, establish boundaries, but it just means, yeah, I'm really mindful. And I really like the examples you gave in the workplace where you're thinking around what else is going on. You use the phrase externalities. Yes, there's so much that is going on, and these are human beings. They are not machines, and we need to, be cognizant of that. Thank you very much for sharing. A shout out to those who've joined us, who've commented. Kenneth, it's good to have you from Nairobi, Kenya. Carl says empathy is simply connecting, listening with compassion, with efforts to understand more effectively. Thank you so much for sharing that, Carl, and for being here. Rob, great to have you here as well. Rob says, I come from a business development and sales innovation background and believe sustainable businesses need to be emotionally mindful of the real situation that the person or business you are selling to is in, and what is the best way to propose value. I like that. Thank you very much. At the end of the day, we are going to have a great conversation about the power of empathy. And remember, we're talking about leading with empathy, and we're really exploring whether it can transform our organizations. Amani, if I can come to you, congratulations on your recent promotion. Okay, maybe it's not so recent now, but congratulations on your promotion. Since you were on last, you've been promoted. I'd like you to share, how has empathy helped you to be a better leader?
Nice. Thank you very much, Mucha, and I appreciate for the promotion. Yes, it's something new, so still living in that. I think when I reflect on empathy, thank you, Liz. I feel I had a very good learning point when I had one-on-one with my line manager. I think it was 2 years back. I was talking with my line manager, the usual one-on-one, and then by then a lot of things were happening. Like the office was extremely busy, and I was the one man, which I believe I could just do it all. Like I'll just run with the project end to end, and that really got me drained. And at some point, when one-on-one, I was like, okay, what's happening? And I don't know, is it just things are not working out? So maybe the projects are not going to the end, and I could not really communicate that. And for me, I felt like maybe I just need to man up, And she asked me one simple question: is there anything that you're hiding? Like for me, that was a very simple question, but I was like, no, I'm not hiding anything. I was like, are you feeling anything? Like, yeah, I feel really tired. And then when I started opening that box, She just recommended one Netflix movie, but then it was really new. I think maybe most of the people know it, The Call to Courage. And she just asked me, go and watch that movie on this weekend. And then I went. And then that weekend, I ended up spending the entire weekend just listening to, I think Brené Brown maybe is one of the most thought-provoking leader when it comes to empathy. And since then, my understanding of empathy has really been instrumental to who I am now. So picked it up from my own line manager, understanding that at some point we might make an assumption that everyone knows it, everyone maybe should be empathetic and should really try to communicate. But to really break it down to what is it that I do every single day that demonstrate this, that I'm truly trying to understand other people's emotion, but also to understand my own. So currently in the leadership position that I currently have, I have a team of 2 to 3 people that I currently manage. And for me, when it means to have empathy is really boiled down to a number of things. Number one, I truly believe that I'll show empathy is trying to be human. We are all emotional beings. So us connecting with our emotion is really the essence of who we are. And empathy is truly about that, to really understand emotion and how those emotions play a very significant role in our lives. And number 2, like everyone has said, is being assertive. Is not an extreme end of yes, is not an extreme end of no. So having empathy is to really understand, but before you say yes, what is it that probably you need to consider? Or before you say no, what is it that you really need to consider? And assertiveness in communication, assertiveness in how we really make decisions. And this is what we require to do every single day in our workplace. And the last, I feel having empathy is being present mentally, being present emotionally, but also being present physically, where there's a lot of information that we convey, not necessarily by talking. A lot of information that we convey by our tone of voice, our sound, and our facial expressions. And without empathy, we might miss out a lot. So for me, I take it upon myself, first of all, to demonstrate or to live on that, so that I don't miss anything, but also to encourage the people that they look up to me to really also embrace empathy, because I need it more than they need it. So it's a replicate effort where I show it and then they show it towards me, and then at the end of the day we create a very healthy working environment.
I love that. Thank you very much, Amani. I really like, well, I like a lot of things you said, but, where you finished this idea that empathy can be reciprocal. So as I extend empathy, I receive empathy. I think that's a really powerful thought for those of us who are in leadership, that it can start with us as we extend empathy to others. And so thank you very much for sharing that. Susan, if I come to you, as an HR practitioner with a wealth of experience, what are your thoughts around empathy and organizations? Can empathy impact organizational culture? Can empathy drive results? What are your thoughts around how empathy can really benefit organizations?
Thanks, Mucha. I was actually really thinking about that as I was listening to Amani, because a lot of what he's talking about is having the right environment that will enable people to perform and deliver. And that's that's the heart of what I do as a HR professional. So empathy plays a really, really big part, particularly now post, our experience with COVID. And what are we saying empathy is? It's people wanting to understand others, right? So where an organization has a culture of empathy, it's an organization where people are encouraged to continuously listen, actively listen, continuously seek to understand the position of the other person. And what does that do for an organization? I think that promotes a lot of, it creates a safe space. And when you have a safe space, you promote a lot of open communication, which will give life to sharing of ideas, which will create comfort in relationships, which means that you'll have a lot of collaboration. You'll find, then you find employees tend to find they're more engaged, and then you'll end up having a lot of retention. So all of these things are things that in strategy, we keep talking about. How do we enhance collaboration? How do we enhance innovation? How do we get new ideas out? But without that safe space, this will not happen. But with empathy, you get that safe space. An organization that also thrives to understand will be more successful in creating solutions that are relevant. And it's solutions for not only employees, but also your customer or your consumer. If you don't understand what problem you're solving or what the pain point is for the employee or your customer or your consumer, then really I don't know what business you're doing as a HR person or as a marketer or business development or research and development. So I think empathy is critical to businesses and organizations thriving and growing and remaining relevant. I think that's what I would say at this point. I think what Liz Amani.
Yeah.
When we were having our debrief, we said that to some people tend to find that empathy is very theoretical and it tends to have no place in the workplace, right?
Yes.
But what does it look like to lead with empathy in your experience?
Well, thank you very much, Susan, on that. I feel I always have this notion. I was very controversial sometimes. I always feel like some of the most important topics have been extremely commercialized. And I think leadership, nutrition, empathy is one of them. Like soon you'll start having people selling books, seminars, and everything. So we started look at it as like in this executive skill. You need to, a community. So I think that sends a message to most of the people that need empathy. Look at it as maybe that's another project management course that I'll take it someday. But I feel leading with empathy, living the practical know-how, everything, I feel from deep down what you have said, Susan, just take an example of listening. It's something that we do every single day, not necessarily at the office, even outside our working environment. We listen, but empathy requires to be more attentive, requires to, as I think someone in the participant said, compassion. These are the things that we as people, we do it every single day, but maybe we don't have the intentions on that. And most times when we train on this particular module, we normally look at empathy being, we all have certain level of empathy. I think also Lisa said, there's a certain level that we already have. But what are the skills? Because it's something that we can learn. What are the skills that we need now to bring so that we can really be more effective on how we understand these emotions, on how we reason with these emotions, and how we act with these emotions. So I personally look at three most important skills that really help me to practically apply empathy in my everyday life, which number one is listening, because I believe that's where we get the most attentively listening, not just with words, everything that's going around. But also another thing is being vulnerable. So by listening, yes, you get that information, but the second is how you do with that. So being vulnerable by, first of all, showing what I feel, what I go through, but also be vulnerable and understanding that maybe other people are fighting battles that I might not be aware of, and being in a position to support. So giving a supporting hand where someone maybe needed the most. So I think looking at those three things, listening, being vulnerable, and really being of help, that helped me to practically apply empathy inside my work environment, but also outside my work environment. And I think it has brought a lot of positive results and really helped me to understand also how other people expect that, because sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where we expect it to come automatically. We think everybody knows it. We think it's an easier skill, but in return, it's actually not. We need to invest in these small skills that can really help us to do that.
Yeah, I like what you just said there, Amani, and I agree with you, especially on that last point around how we have to invest. And you'll be surprised that empathy is something that can come more naturally for some than others. I don't naturally have empathy. Empathy is not a natural skill for me. Empathy is something I've had to develop. I'm not naturally empathic, and I think it's because I'm a highly practical person. So typically when someone is, sharing something they're going through, my default response is to fix it. And that's not empathy. Empathy isn't jumping in to say, let's fix it. Empathy is, There's that famous video that Brené Brown shares that says empathy is just sitting with a person and saying, I'm here for you, I'm listening to you. My default is, okay, let's fix it. How can we fix it? What can we do next? So I've had to learn to practice empathy because it's something that's so powerful and something that's so important. And I think that for me is one of the greatest takeaways for anyone who's listening, that, everything we explore in these lunch and learns, anything that's rooted in emotional intelligence is a skill, which means that you can actually build and develop it. It doesn't matter where you are currently, you can get bending empathy to others and extending empathy to yourself. Interestingly, for me, my low levels of empathy is both ways, to others and to self. So it's not like I favor myself. Before I come to you, Liz, with the next question, let me just have a look at what comments have come through. Carl says empathy should be about finding out how they can support. If a person is attempting to fix a problem, right, what I just said, without understanding, then that's not empathy, right? Catherine says, hi, good people, learning a lot here. Susan displays empathic leadership daily at her workplace and in her personal life. I've personally learned a lot from her on this particular subject. Yes, thank you very much to those who are online. Please do say hi, tell us where you are logged in from, and get ready and ask any questions you may have. If you have a question for a particular panelist, just indicating your question. If it's an open one, then just share it so that we can sample some of the questions you have. Liz, let me get to something that may be a little controversial. Is it true that women leaders are more empathic than men? Is this a strength that female leaders can capitalize on?
I'm laughing because I wish that was a poll. I'd love to hear what our online guests and audience have to say about this. Do you think women are more of empathetic leaders than men? I think, to answer your question, Mucha, I feel like oftentimes this is the expectation, because we often know women as nurturers, as caregivers, and being by default nurturers and caregivers, we have some high level of empathy towards a lot of things. But then it depends also often on different circumstances and contexts. So I'll give an example where we would make the assumption that women are more empathetic. I remember back in the day when I was a news anchor at one of the leading stations in Kenya, and I was pregnant. And, there's a lot of different changes that happen with you. I was, I think, 3 shades darker. My foundation was not working. I was growing a little human, but also myself, I added I think 30 kgs or something. So you don't feel confident, right? And I remember saying, no, I'm so tired. And my pregnancy had a lot of complications. I was admitted 3 times. And I said, I don't think I can do this. My due date was in March. And so I took leave from early January, 2 months before, because I just couldn't. And I recall one of our senior editors who was female saying, giving birth is nothing. There's a day I read news now and actually went and gave birth. A few hours. Yeah. So I felt a lack of empathy there because it's different experiences for different people. And it often reminds me of the meme of when somebody is sharing, and just going back to what Amani did mention around listening, really active listening, and what you said, Mucha. And sometimes it's just giving the person an audience and not trying to fix it and say, I went through the same thing and this is how I overcame it, right? Because we're all very different. I feel generally women are more empathetic, but that does not go to say that men are not empathetic. I've met some of the most empathetic leaders who are male. But oftentimes, and why women might be more empathetic even to women is because we understand each other, we understand the challenges. If you have a male boss and you tell a supervisor or manager and tell them, I have no nanny, and he might not really understand. And I recall just a few weeks back, one of my team members called me and said, Liz, I have no nanny. And I quickly said, you know what? Say no more. It is fine. In fact, what I wanted to tell you, it's okay. Let me figure out who else I can reach out to, because we understand some of the things by bias, by being of the same gender. But sometimes it takes us to really speak about these things. I recall being in a conversation where we were having a debate around whether there should be legislation around ensuring the nursing rooms in all, facilities where people work. And I recall this gentleman saying, when women don't talk about the struggles they're going through, we cannot understand, and we're not able to support or to be allies. And that really resonated, because oftentimes we make assumptions that you should know or understand what I'm going through. And it goes back to what even Susan was saying. It has to be an active conversation between two people, right? So just to answer your question, I'd love to see what people have commented. I feel generally women are more empathetic, only because by default they're caregivers, they're nurturers, they've taken care of people. But that does not say that men are not empathetic. I've met some of the most empathetic leaders who are male.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that last comment, because in my household, definitely my husband is more empathetic than I am. And I think for him it comes naturally. So I can agree. I want to stay with you, Liz, because as you were sharing, a thought came to my mind. And I wondered if, as women grow in leadership, do you think that they sometimes feel pressure to not be empathetic for fear that empathy will be seen as a weakness? Do you feel that, we've created, or not we've created, or society has, created this persona or perception of what, leaders look like, based more on the kind of male approach to leadership, because for the longest time it's men who have been leading. Do you think at times a woman feels like, if I listen to that story about her nanny, she'll take advantage of me. Let me be, you know what I mean? Yes, I naturally, emotionally connect with her, but I can't give her that space. That just came to my mind as you were sharing.
I feel you. I think as women grow into leadership, they become, because men are more stoic, they're more, assertive, and I think women, I don't think they fear. Say, I will speak on my perspective. I don't think I fear being looked at as weak, because I know I'm really a tough cookie. I think the thing is just being able to create boundaries so that people don't take advantage of that. Yeah. And sometimes you have to draw the line and mention, and also coach your team. And this is where the coaching and mentorship comes in as a leader. You're empathetic, but you still coach and mentor them to tell them, this is how you're able to manage your time. Be careful so that things in your household do not overlap and start affecting your professional output. Because at the end of the day, you're competing for that promotion with somebody who doesn't have 10 kids or 5 kids or 3 kids. And, there's some parameters that people look at. Are you delivering? And that's the saddest reality in the workplace. That's what a sales director will look at. For you to get that position, who's bringing in more numbers? They won't listen to excuses. Maybe I didn't have a nanny, or this child was unwell. It's really the outcome. So it's really having that clear balance of when you can be really empathetic, but where you also draw the boundaries so that then people don't start taking advantage of that.
I really like that point you've made, Liz. And I like what you've highlighted, this idea that, empathy doesn't mean that there's no boundaries, right? Empathy, means that, yes, I can, I can see your perspective, I can see where you're coming from, but at the same time, as a leader, there must be some boundaries. And I really like what you said about coaching your team, right? So coaching the team to know that, yes, you're the kind of manager, you're the kind of leader who will, really take their perspective into it, but it doesn't make you a walkover. You can still be empathic and yet still drive the team to execution, because you're right. At the end of the day, there are results that are required. Susan, you look like you wanted to say
Yes,
something.
yes, I'm over here. Yes.
Burning.
So there are
Go
two
ahead.
things that just popped into my head as Liz was talking, and even as Amani talked earlier. So one is about the boundaries, and it goes to both of them. So Amani, when he was sharing about how empathy shows up as a leader, one of the things he mentioned was about being vulnerable. And when I think about the gender, whether there's a gender sensitivity to or predisposition to empathy, in my experience, I've found that men are actually turning out to be a little bit more empathic, especially to the female employees. And what I'm finding to be an upcoming challenge now is where employees now take advantage of that, where they realize that there's this gray area where men don't understand, and therefore I can exploit this in order to get away with doing less. So I like that Liz said, get the boundaries, make it very clear that you do have very clear expectations. Yes, and I am a leader who practices empathy. However, that doesn't mean that you get to drop the ball. It just means that I can understand a different way of you working towards delivering. It doesn't mean that I'm going to cut you all that slack. It's about the method in which that you are going to deliver, not that I'm going to change the goalposts for you. So I just wanted to highlight that so that as we emphasize on the need to be empathic, we also emphasize on the structures that you need to put in place so that you're not dropping the ball.
Yeah, I like that. I agree 100% that, and I think generally when we talk about the idea of emotional intelligence, emotional intelligence isn't being soft. Emotional intelligence isn't allowing people to, get away with murder. It's not. It's about the how, right? So I can say no in an emotionally intelligent way,
Yes.
and I can say no and still be empathic. It doesn't mean that just because I'm empathic, I'm always going to say yes. And so that fear about emotional intelligence being a weakness is just really not understanding what EQ actually is.
Yeah.
Let me just have a quick look before I come to, I think, Susan, I want to ask you something next, but I have a comment here. Emmanuel, welcome, Emmanuel Agunda. Emmanuel says that empathic leadership means having the ability to understand the needs of others and being aware of their feelings and thoughts. Unfortunately, it has long been a soft skill that is overlooked at work. And
Yeah.
in the research that I've done, it really looks at the idea that leaders who are empathic actually drive bottom line results. And there's a number of reasons for that. But leaders who are empathic drive bottom line results. So it is a soft skill that actually drives hard results. Susan, why is empathy vital for leading an ethical life in the workplace?
Okay. So Mucha, I always have to draw from the big book. So for that one, I think I would reference the golden rule that do unto others as you want done unto you, right? And empathy is a lot about that. We said it's about stepping into others' shoes. And the same applies when you start thinking about how to treat others. So if you're being able to step in their shoes, then your decision on how to treat others, how to reward, how to assign work is not self-driven, but rather comes from a place of compassion and a greater good. Because you're thinking about, if I was in that situation, how would I want this conversation to proceed? How would it be beneficial for me for my engagement to continue if it's like an employee, for example? So I think if you reference the golden rule of do unto others as you wish done to you, then that's your empathy right there, and it leads you on a path, on an ethical path, because then you're being fair to all concerned.
I like that. I like that. Thank you very much for sharing that, Susan. I read I read some material as part of the work that I do with 6 Seconds, and it's a concept that was introduced by one of the founders of 6 Seconds. So 6 Seconds is the world's largest emotional intelligence network, and PTS Africa, the organization I lead, is the preferred partner for 6 Seconds in East Africa. And it's this idea of making others good. It's a concept called making others good. And this concept of making others good is based on the premise that as you interact with others, you remind yourself that if you had walked the way they've walked, if you had the experience that they have, if you had the expertise level that they have, if you had the background that they have, you would make the same choice they are making right now. So the idea here is reminding ourselves that a lot of the choices people make that sometimes frustrate us are really about the journey they've walked. And we can often look down on others as though if I were in their shoes, I would do different. And that interferes with extending empathy. But when we can, for a moment, suspend judgment and tell ourselves that maybe if I was in their shoes, I would behave like that too, it would really influence the way that we interact with them. And so that's the idea of making others good. Susan, let me stay with you. And let me just remind everyone who is online, please do share your questions with us. We'd like to answer any questions you have around leading with empathy. So do just type them in, whether you're with us on LinkedIn or on YouTube. Feel free to share your questions with us. And I know my able panel will be able to answer. Susan, you know I like to be practical, right? I want people to come away from this lunch and learn with actions they can take immediately so they can go and implement like a plug and play. So what 3 tips would you give to a member of the team who needs to develop greater empathy? So whether someone has come up to you and they've identified themselves that empathy perhaps is an area that isn't an area of strength for them, or indeed maybe as the HR, as a person leading HR, you've noticed as you've interacted with them and you're really giving advice. What practical tips would you give someone who needs to develop greater empathy?
Okay, thanks, Mucha. Let me borrow from our early stages, our early formative stages. Empathy is about the other, right? Understanding the other. And it's something that we actually practice when we're very, very little. If you look at a newborn and you start cooing and kind, they mimic what you're doing. And it's because they're taking in your facial expression, they're taking in your voice, your tone, your volume. They're there, they're in that moment with you, taking in all the cues that you have. And as they get older, they could be in a room with adults and adults are speaking, and from the intonation of conversation or from the mood of the room, they're able to learn and pick up a lot. If you're with a toddler in the vehicle and they're driving, you are probably listening to your music. The child is looking outside the window, taking in the trees, and they're learning a lot. So if I can borrow from them, I would say you can develop empathy by being open to learn. Yeah. So make yourself, I guess, to borrow from what Amani said, make yourself vulnerable. One of the things I would say for empathy is start talking to people you ordinarily don't talk to. Yeah. Talk to somebody from a different background, somebody from a different religion, somebody from a different ethnic group, from a different profession, and really be in that conversation and listen, be present. Listen to what their journey has been like, because remember, you're practicing a skill. You're trying to develop and practice a skill. So listen to what their journey has been like, their experiences. Watch their facial expressions to see what excites them, what makes them sad, what makes them happy. Just be present in that moment. I think we live in an age where there's so much stimuli. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of pressure. We're connected to so many devices, and we need to learn how to be a little bit more mindful. So number 1 would be step out of your comfort zone and encounter new people. Yeah. Another one for empathy, especially for leaders, is humility. Try and do something new. So for example, I cannot skate to save my life. So one of the things that's very humbling. So I went with a friend of mine to Panari, which is here in Nairobi, an ice skating rink, and just keep falling on your backside a couple times. And what that does is it builds your humility. And empathy really does require a lot of humility, because it means you step out of your know-it-all space and you get into trying to understand somebody else's space, somebody else's journey. so that you can use that data to move forward. So try something different once in a while that you're not so great at. Yeah. So number one, engage new people. Number two, try something that will cause you to develop your humility. Then another one is check your biases. Be real with yourself. We all have biases, yeah? So there's some things, let's say, for example, my mother's generation, yeah? If she had walked into a room and seen somebody with dreadlocks, maybe a piercing, yeah, she would maybe automatically make a decision about that person and not engage them as much as maybe she would engage a beautiful lady like Liz, who's more conventional, you know? And that bias would stop her or him, somebody in that generation, from being able to engage with that person. So check your biases. Or you hear a conversation about politics, which a lot of people get very passionate about. And because, you know, whatever the conversation is, it's supporting a particular party you're not interested in, you switch off. You're denying yourself an opportunity to learn something and flex your empathy muscle. Yeah. So one, build your tolerance. Yeah. Start to be a little bit more open-minded by engaging, by checking your biases. And by check your biases, it means first recognize what your biases are and then catch yourself when you're letting your biases make a decision for you. Two, engage with people who you ordinarily wouldn't. You will learn so much. And three, build your humility. So I think those are three that you can work with, Michelle.
I love that. Yes, and those are three that are really practical, right? So someone can actually go out and do what you have just said. And you're so right about putting yourself in a space where you aren't the one who knows everything. And I can imagine that from a leadership perspective, that would also be something quite great if you did that in a space where you are with the team, right? So the team can see that there are some areas that you don't know everything in. So thank you very much for sharing that. I think that's really insightful. Yes, let me
Maybe
just
Something on that before, sorry, Liz. So on a practical one, really for leaders, is something that I do on a regular basis as a HR professional. So as a HR professional, I need to understand every role in an organization. So this afternoon, I'm scheduled to sit at our with a security staff. So we have security assistants at different points of entry, and I'm going to spend 2 hours there. I have no clue how the machine works. I have no clue what their checklist looks like. But sitting there, I will learn something that will inform decisions about the organization. I will learn something that will inform how I treat cases that come from that department. I've done it before, and it's always, I mean, there was one where we changed the whole uniform because it just was not practical for the staff that were doing the work that they were doing. So we had airline staffs in particular outfit that just could not work when they're doing their service and they're, so get out there in a space that you're not the know-it-all, and your empathy will propel your leadership decisions.
yeah, fantastic. Liz, you wanted to jump in. Go ahead.
yes, definitely. I wanted to jump in and just add maybe one more to Susan's points. And that was, as a leader, try taking your team out, like beyond the office setting. Because oftentimes, depending, and I think it's Amani who talked about, or Susan talked about the environment, sometimes people feel comfortable sharing something outside the office. It's also really good to see people in their element, which is not out of work. I think that really helps. I think it's something that I've carried on with my team, and it's made people feel more comfortable. They feel some level of they can resonate with some things. They're able to reach out when they're really stuck, because sometimes people fear reaching out to managers or to people in leadership because they don't want to seem like they don't know, right? They don't want to seem, and I always say, kuliza sio ujinga, always ask, even the most basic things, ask,
Yes,
ask, ask away,
yes.
right? I think just moving out of that setting, it could be a coffee, it could be a lunch, it could be, a potluck where everybody, and I've done that, where everybody brings their favorite meal and has prepared it themselves, and brings it to even the boardroom in the office or just somewhere where you guys can catch up. I think it really helps you to be in a different environment. And I was just laughing because when Susan was saying, or maybe that generation would like to talk to Liz, who looks well put together, until I turn and see this entire tattoo that covers my back.
See, there was my bias
And
working.
I'm
That
like,
was my
oh.
bias working.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my addition.
Thank you very much for that,
Mucha,
Liz.
sorry, I have a question that I had meant to
Yes.
ask earlier, and
Yes.
I wanted to hear Amani's perspective on whether women
More.
are more empathic leaders.
Yes, I think that's a
Okay.
great question.
I
Mani,
believe
what
there
is
was
your
there
experience?
was a poll. I believe there was a poll on the chat, so I'm looking forward
Mucha
just
will tell us what the
to
viewers are
Yes,
saying.
yes.
yeah.
I'm just waiting for the results from the poll, but yes, you can tell us your thoughts, Amani.
Yes. Well, I think I'll borrow the example that you gave, Mucha. I think what you said, your husband is probably the more empathetic, and I think I will also refer to the same. I think my fiancée is probably less empathetic than me because her work, everything that she's doing, just requires her to, like action, and I think I work with people every single day. It's a human capital, and she worked with like numbers and all sort. And I think it was just the other day we were trying to do. I was trying to see where we are by simply we just curated a hypothetical situation, and then we challenge everyone to say, okay, how will you respond to this? And then I took her completely outside her area where I asked her, okay, someone came want you to change lunch on the office. And for her, like, okay, so it's lunch, let's just change it. I'm like, okay, so this is how I'll approach it. I'll do 1, 2, 3. So I took a very simple example, but I learned that it's not about men versus women. I truly believe there's a lot of other issues around empathy. Maybe our personality profile. Sometimes we are pruned to act certain ways because like your personality is just like that. Maybe our upbringing also, culture and everything. So I believe maybe that is just one spectrum which can make us maybe differ. Women might be pruned to be more empathetic because I think, as Lisa
Yeah.
said, naturally they are just like that. But where we are going now, I believe also we might be biased by concluding that. So in my own relationship, I am more empathetic than how she is. But
Than your
it was not,
fiance. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. I'm just waiting for the team to share the results of the poll. So it'll be interesting to see those who are online what they've shared. And I think we'll share it on our PTS pages thereafter. And it'll be great to hear the conversation, right, from people as to what they think about that. I think for me, what excites me about skills like empathy is from the conversation we've had, it is a crucial skill for leadership. And there's the word, it is a skill. So if you're like me and it doesn't come naturally, that's okay. I think that too often I think it's a very African thing. We think of pass fail kind of scenario, but it's okay if I'm not great. As a matter of fact, knowing I'm not great is powerful because now I can do something about it. So yeah, I think that that's really important. So let's move on to some more questions. Liz, I'd like to hear from you because we've talked about how empathy is important. So Liz, imagine there's someone who realizes, oh, wait a minute, I've not really been empathic in the past, right? So I've been a very abrasive kind of leader, or I have an approach that says my way or the highway. I don't care how you're feeling. I'm the kind of person who says leave all that mess at the door, right? So what would your advice be to someone who has not been empathic in the past? Perhaps it's a leader who's listening, like I said, who realizes they need to change their ways. How can they undo the damage that they've done in the past and extend greater empathy to their teams?
I will take to them a newborn baby. I'm just kidding. I think I would honestly really heavily borrow from what Susan has so aptly stated in terms of some of the 3 tips on how somebody can become more empathetic. Just one of the things, and I'll use an example with the environment that I've been in. A lot of times we don't understand each other's roles. Like somebody doesn't understand what communication does. Do you just tweet out things, or because it looks very simple when you think about just tweeting and taking pictures and stuff, right? And when I think of procurement, it's very simple for you to just imagine it's just a conversation with a supplier. What can be very hard with that? Yeah. So one of the things that I have done, for instance, is sort of like a role shadowing for even 2 days. Pair people with different, even this particular leader, let him get out of his space or her space and move to something completely different to just try understand the intricacies of, say, project management, of procurement, of logistics. We often think that, oh, a driver, it's just driving from point A to point B, until you sit down in traffic for 2 hours and you wonder, how do courier service people do this on a daily basis, right? The patience they have is phenomenal. So I think just asking or recommending for that leader to take up an interest in somebody else's role, in things that they don't understand, that really helps. Recommending some books, to be very candid, recommending even some documentaries so that you just get to learn and understand, because there's a power in storytelling. I often say I'm a storyteller and I love listening to stories, because there's one thing about data. By saying one in 5 children under 5 in sub-Sahara will not reach the age of 5 because of some of the challenges we have. But then it's different when you hear it from that 4-year-old who's not too sure whether they're going to make it to 5 years old. I think documentaries, just recommending some things that they can be able to slowly but progressively start having a shift in behavior, would really, really help.
Thank you, Liz. I think that's really awesome, and you're so right that just by taking time as a leader to ensure that people have an understanding of what others do, it can really transform the team. Because you're right, what is communication? Yeah, you're spending the day online on social media, and yet there's so much more to the role. And the more I understand that, the more I understand who you are. Emmanuel, it's great to see your comments online. Emmanuel says, as a leader, I smile and take the trouble to remember people's names in the office, even if they are not in my team. That's empathy in action. Also, I give people my full attention in meetings, being curious about their lives and interests and offering constructive feedback are all empathic behaviors that I constantly use to remain a good leader. That emotion of curiosity, I think, is crucial if we're going to extend empathy. When we are curious about others, we are driven to learn more about them. And when we're driven to learn more about them, that sparks empathy, right? We are more willing to extend ourselves for them because we're curious. We're curious to know more. We're curious to understand them. So thank you very much for sharing that. Amani, let me come to you and ask, how does empathy contribute to positive relationships within the workplace and teams?
Nice. Thank you very much. So I think when we talk about relationship, especially for now, I'd like to remove first the word workplace. Just focus on relationship in itself, because I believe relationship, it's everywhere. It can be within our workplace, it can be outside. And I believe most of the people who join this call here, in one way or the other, they have either relationship at work, relationship at maybe you have a club that you're currently joining. All those are relationship. And I believe if we ask everyone to make a list of what makes that relationship strong, they can make a list that is pretty much very long. And if we ask what can maybe destroy or what can maybe hinder the effectiveness of that relationship, we can compare the two, right? What can make you succeed and what can make you not really having a healthy relationship. I think for me, what you'll see is you'll see a list of things that you directly related to empathy. I believe if right now we are to take what help us to build strong relationship, we have to talk about trust. We have to talk about communication. We have to talk about collaboration. We have to talk about, like all elements of how we communicate. We have to talk about, ways that just responsibility, how we assign each other responsibility, and how we hold everyone accountable. I think when we look at all these elements, all the foundation of relationship, I believe empathy is the mother. You will achieve that. You will achieve trust if you are able to really create an environment where I'm vulnerable. I'll tell you what I feel. You tell me what you feel, and then we help one another. We can effectively communicate if we know that I need to do that so that I can really get a full picture to what the person I'm talking to is going through, like what Susan said. If she's going to spend 2 hours with the colleagues today, she's going to build a bond that maybe they might be able to share things that on normal PPTs and office meetings they might not be able to share. And I think for me, that is what now bring a healthy workplace. Empathy unlocks all these possibilities of bringing a strong bond, collaborating with other people, creativity, like having ideas to just think like, oh, okay, someone said about this when we talk about the nursing rooms. That's it's a benefit of having just empathy and understanding, okay, what is it that they're going through, and now create a healthy environment just because of showing empathy. So it's a byproduct. Everything else is a byproduct of empathy.
Empathy. I really like that. And, one of the things you mentioned is the idea of trust. So, a research project conducted by 6 Seconds identified trust as one of the biggest contributors to sustainable performance in organizations. And you're 100% right. You are spot on when you talk about the fact that, trust is rooted in empathy. When we have leaders who are high in empathy, they engender trust. Teams are more likely to trust them. And that then ultimately leads to the bottom line. A lot of these skills that previously were thought of as soft, nice to have skills are actually skills that are essential for success in today's environment. I'm having a quick look at the comments. I don't see any question here. If you do have a question, now is the time to ask it. We've asked it. We've come to that point where we do a Q&A. So please feel free to ask any question you have. You can share it in the comments directly to one of my panelists, or indeed you can just make it an open question. The team are telling me that the poll actually will be running for the whole week. So what we're going to do is continue sharing the link, because I think this is an interesting conversation, an interesting question. Are women more empathic than men? So follow us on our socials and you can contribute to your thoughts to that poll as well at PTS Africa across all platforms. And you can also connect with us, connect with me at Musha Mlingo at all platforms. Fantastic. I see some questions coming through. Ooh, this is a good one. I don't know which one of you is going to answer it first. Is empathy teachable to your boss? Is empathy teachable to your boss? Question by Wildest Dreams. Is empathy teachable to your boss? I don't know who wants to tackle that one. And we could have everyone share their thoughts. Can I teach my boss? Because clearly my boss is not empathic, right? Yes, Susan, go ahead.
It's yes, because your boss is a human being. And if you remember what Amani said, it goes both ways, yeah? And if you remember what I said even about the baby. So babies look at others and they mirror. And then when you're feeding a baby, what do? Right? So empathy works the same way. So if you start to show some empathy, I think a lot of times we expect our bosses to be superhuman, who have these super leadership skills, and they should be able to know how to manage me. But similarly, you have the responsibility to manage your boss. So you need to show what empathy is so that your boss can also learn how to mirror it. So do you show interest in your boss? Do you show interest in who they are, what their challenges are, what their fears are? We imagine that bosses don't have fears. Do you know what their fears are? Do you know what their concerns are? I think we can teach our bosses empathy by showing them empathy. And most human beings, when you start to soften and show your vulnerability, they reciprocate. They mirror that same activity, that same approach to you. So that's what I would say.
I love that. Thank you very much for sharing. There's a follow-up question. And, Susan, I can stay with you, but anyone else can also comment. This is from Tessie. Hey, Tessie. And Tessie asks, if your leader is not empathic, should you raise it with them and how? All right. So this is a little different. It's not so much, can you teach them, but should you comment? Should you, mention? And if you are mentioning, how would you mention? I think that is a good question. Susan, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but Amani looks like, everyone wants to comment. I like. All right. So Amani, you had your hand up, and then Liz, we can come to you as well.
All right. Good. I think the question is more or less somehow close to the previous question. I'll say I'll go with the same approach like Susan advised. I will show, don't tell. I would rather show empathy and show that I need empathy by asking, by asking guiding question that will make them wanting to know what I need, rather than telling them that actually, you know what, man, you're not empathetic. So because to some people, it's not very clear, it's not. I don't want us to assume that simply the word leadership is associated to empathy. You can have a leader that does not have empathy. So I think the word human for me is associated with empathy. As long as they're human, then they have feelings. I know for sure. Then let's now start showing those feelings. Let's engage in a friendly conversation that will help them also to understand. And I've been in a situation where leaders I think we have not talked about the word sympathy. And I think most times we look at verses. Empathy is different from sympathy. And I think sometimes you might find leaders which they are not really sure where they are. And I think it's important to just appreciate first. Maybe they're just from recognizing emotion, but they don't know what to do about it. It has a lot to do with so many things. So it's really important to first appreciate where they are and to show where they can be by simply asking questions, or really do you do it and then they replicate.
Thank you. Liz, you wanted to jump in.
Yes, my answer is slightly different from Amani's because I'm really more straightforward. I think being very sometimes outspoken and straightforward is a good and bad thing. So instead of show, I would ideally tell. And it happened before in my previous capacities where I have told my supervisor, and I always prefer it being a face-to-face conversation as opposed to either a phone call or a text message, because there's a way when you read some text, you're like, when you're joking something, get out of here. Imagine reading that in a text. Like, what? Yeah. So I would actually tell, giving an example of, just you have some time, there's some pertinent issues I'd like to discuss with you. And it's often worked. And sometimes people appreciate the straightforwardness and say, I really don't appreciate that right after surgery, I'm being called to attend a meeting. I don't feel that's empathetic. I don't feel that's really right. And, and they often do appreciate that. So I think depending on how you assess it, I feel that being just straightforward and just mentioning it to them, I mean, it's not being abrasive, it's just you really being vulnerable. Just going back to what Amani did mention, being vulnerable and saying, I did not appreciate that. I didn't feel appreciated. I felt you consider just me as a machine, and sometimes they do appreciate when you're straightforward. So I would definitely just outrightly mention it. And I would also love when my team, and I often tell them, when you feel I've not been empathetic or sympathetic with you, please tell me. Yeah.
That last comment you made, I think, is very important for leaders who happen to be listening. that you then want to cultivate an environment where you are open to getting that feedback. Unfortunately, sometimes the environment is one that someone feels like, hey, I can't possibly go and say what I'm thinking.
Or
Olive, I
use
think
an
is
ally. Sorry
yes, sure.
for interrupting, but use an ally. Just because I see a
Mm,
question here on when it comes to leaders, correction upwards is sort
yes,
of perceived as disrespect. But then
yeah,
I think there's usually a lot of confusion between disrespect and insubordination.
yeah,
Those are totally different things, and it's about the tone. Just what Susan was talking about. How do you frame it? What tone?
yeah,
What context? Are you
yeah,
approaching this person when they're in the middle of a crisis? They're being
yeah,
asked about numbers. There's a lot of
yeah,
considerations to look at, but I think there's a very clear boundary between being respectful and insubordination.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you,
I
Liz.
think I would add to that that this is where we call your empathy to action. You
Mm.
practice empathy and understand the situation of the person who you want to address and understand when, just like Liz is saying, understand when and understand how that they'll, put it in a way that they'll understand and appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much for that. And I think that, what I'm hearing you all say is get to understand the environment, right? So Olive, it's about understand the environment, understand your leader. A key and integral part of managing upwards is understanding the person that you report to and knowing, what's the best approach. You might find that the approach to actually speak out works, but it works in a certain environment or it works
Yes.
at a certain time. As Liz says, if someone is having a crunch time about numbers, that's not the time they're going to be open to having a conversation around how you feel that they are not extending empathy. Again, as Liz and Susan have said, it's also about how you say it, right? There's a lot to be said about the how. How do you speak when you're articulating where you feel that you need additional support? One of the things I always say when you're speaking to your supervisor or someone in leadership is, and I mean, to be honest, this is actually speaking to anyone, refrain from using absolutes. You always, you never. That's not a good start if you're giving feedback. Number two, be very specific. So you can't say, I feel that, you are lacking in empathy and that's it. No, be very specific. When this happened, you did this. And as a result of that, I feel this. So be very specific about what it is that you
I
feel.
feel this, and it resulted in me either acting or not
Yes,
acting.
exactly,
Bring it
exactly.
back home to how that affects
The
whatever it is that
business.
they needed you to do.
Yes, 100%. So, I think it's really important that we just practice emotional intelligence, extend empathy to our leaders, and think through how to frame it so that you can get the best possible result. I have a number of other questions. Amani, I'm mindful that you may need to leave us. So, thank you so much for being here with us. We really appreciate you. I have a few more questions I want to quickly get to in the remaining minutes that we have. There's a comment here from Olive. I am a beneficiary of fireside chats with Lizz Ntonjira and outdoor treats away from normal workspace. She is practicing what she is preaching.
Liz, there's a question for you as Mucha reconnects. As a leader, there's an expectation that team members answerable to you need to solve problems. How does empathy come in when they fail to after trying?
I think empathy comes here in coaching and mentorship. Um, and it's really important as a leader to give assignments to people that you can stretch them out. You've really assessed this is your team. You know them sometimes in and out, right? And you know these are their key strengths and areas that they need improvements on, etc. I mean, it's just having the constant iteration with your supervisor and telling them genuinely, I'm stuck. I really would appreciate your guidance on maybe you're trying to pitch something to a media house. I would really appreciate either your connections or maybe just rewording my pitch, or how do I go about to solve this problem? Because remember, as a leader, you're not there to issue instructions. No, you're there to facilitate the execution of work. So for me, it's really key for somebody as in a leadership position to understand you're not just daily backing out orders like, hey, I need something on X and X. Hey, I need these numbers to hit 10 million by the end of the month. I need X and X. No, it's about you creating a thriving and enabling environment where you're facilitating all your departmental targets to be met through your team. So you're the person they look up to or look to help them, accomplish some tasks. And sometimes you might have to actually take up the task if somebody is unable to do it, but you teach them as you're doing it. So I think that's how you can practice empathy.
So Olive, I think that's the role of a leader. I mean, Liz has put it very clearly that the leader should walk the journey with you. And I think what is also important, because Liz is speaking as a leader, is that Olive, when you do start to get stuck or realize that you're not making it, that's the time to call in your leader. Don't wait for the leader to come and ask you what happened. I think when you encounter the challenges, your leader is there to support and facilitate. So raise the flag early enough, and then you're able to get the support that you need.
I like what you've just said there, Susan, this idea of raising the support early. And I think, again, where leaders are high in empathy, it actually encourages people to do that. Because when I know that I have the kind of leader who will not just roast me, but will really look to connect with, what effort I've made, try and see where I went wrong, try and support me in learning from my mistake, I'm more likely to put up my hand and say, okay, I think I've made a mistake here. But where a leader is one who is not approachable, low in empathy, it actually causes people to kind of remain in their mistake, fear of speaking out. So I think that's another way empathy is great. Yes, Liz.
Yes, and I really, really love the point that you'd mentioned earlier. I think it's you or Susan that talked about learning about your manager. What kind of person are they? And honestly, to where I have reached in my career has been greatly accredited to all my previous supervisors. Why? Because working somewhere, and working with, there's something called a book by Erin Mayer called Culture Map. I would really encourage people to read it because it's really helpful when you understand different cultures, because now we're in this cosmopolitan space where we don't have boundaries. Particularly with the pandemic, you can work from anywhere in the world, and you work with people from diverse cultures. And I remember very early on in my career where I had an American boss, and they like you to just get straight to the point. And I remember when you're explaining something, and I knew Mr. Steve Smith, when he starts scratching his head, he's running out of patience. Like, are we going to get there? And so that really taught me on how to be very succinct, precise, and to the point when you're trying to articulate issues. I learned so much from, there is an assumption that the public sector does not do well, like working in the fourth estate, where part of our work was holding the people in power accountable, and a lot of them were working in the public sector. I was really curious how the public sector works. And in my work at the Competition Authority of Kenya, it was nothing of what we have made assumptions of, like people working in at 10 a.m., 11 a.m. No, that never happened. My boss would be at work by 6 a.m. So when I come in, even at 7, I feel like I'm late. That taught me like to be always early on time, Get a few things off your desk as you just get ready for the day. Another key thing I learned from him, and sometimes there's a lot we also learn from the lack of empathy from people, because it teaches you some skills that will help you in future. Like from one of my, in the public sector, when you say, when is this assignment due? And you say next week, I mean, that guy would just shake his head and say, next week, is it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? And that taught me anytime, even when I'm making plans with my friends, I tell them, Mucha, we will meet on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Does 4 to 5 work for you? I mean,
Yeah.
being very specific. And, another boss taught me about a stickler to deadlines. Like you would do anything, which goes back to the point you're talking about, Susan, about speaking early when you're not able to meet a deadline. Because we have some people who are really sticklers to deadlines. And that taught me to always stick to my deadlines. You will be in her good pages, right? So I think there's also quite a lot to learn from non-empathetic leaders, or even leaders that we fear to approach. And it's just about having a conversation and learning, because they've been there before us.
Yeah.
And it's just about the coaching and mentorship.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Liz, there's a question here, and I think you actually spoke about this earlier
Good.
when you were talking about what empathy is. So Emmanuel was saying, one of my questions, I need more guidance. Since empathy is an enormous concept, I have a feeling that empathy has three main components. And you shared about this when you were talking about what empathy is. So perhaps this can be our last question because our time is fast spent. And you could just give us remind us what your response was around what empathy is. And Liz, as you do that, once you're done, you can give us your parting shot as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Manuel, for that question. Early on, I did mention that the three sort of types of empathies, and one is reflexive, and that every human is born with it. It's when you see a baby crying, you are pushed to act. When you see a movie that you really like, I mean, dozens of us have cried on The Notebook, on the Titanic. I cried when Sinbad died in Lion King. And I couldn't understand, why am I crying because a cartoon is dead? Yeah, it's just that reflexive empathy that we have. The other one is emotional empathy, because you're very closely linked to somebody. You vicariously experience their pain. Say, for instance, your brother, your very close friend, your uncle, your sister, your mother is going through a very painful period or painful experiences, and you are sad, not because you're directly going through it, but because you feel their pain by extension. And I think the cognitive one, which we apply a lot in the workplace, is the cognitive empathy, which is just putting yourself in the position of somebody and trying to really understand and take perspective on what they are dealing with and how they will execute whatever it is they need to. As a parting shot, I think empathy is not cast on stone. It's something that is, for all of us, it is evolving. A biggest attribute, I think, for empathy that a number of us don't talk about is patience. Empathy requires a lot of patience, which many of us might not have, but it's something that we continue to learn. And I think when we think about being kind, being nice, and being empathetic, I think the one underlying thing that all those skills have in common is they're learned over time. So don't feel bad that maybe you feel, oh, I'm such a bad person, I don't empathize. It's something that we all struggle with, but slowly but surely we'll get there. But also have boundaries. And I think that's really important. And we've talked a bit about it. Have boundaries so that then people don't take advantage and then you're labeled, oh, the softy boss, just go to that one to get your off day. Yeah. That I think would be my parting shot.
Wow, thank you so much, Liz. I think, so much insight from what you have shared. And I really like that final point for anyone who joined us after we'd already discussed this earlier. I did ask you, Liz, if empathy is being soft. And I think you've reminded us again that it's not. Empathy is not being soft. Being an empathic leader doesn't mean that there are no boundaries. And Olive is commenting again, emotional intelligence is also understanding and perceiving the differences in women, in men and women, like their personalities, their way of working. Liz alluded to this, and nothing could be more true. So empathy is really about going out of your way to recognize that people are different and to celebrate those differences. Susan, your parting shot as we come to the end of this fabulous conversation.
For starters, I just want to say thanks to Liz and Amani and Mucha. As always, it's been a really great conversation and a lot of learning and a lot of things to ponder. What would I say? I think empathy is not just about leadership and organizations. I think empathy is just it belongs in your day to day. I think if you're able to learn and exercise and practice empathy, you'll end up with a lot more fruitful experiences, relationships, and even your own productivity will improve and that of your teams. And I think to address a question I saw there, why is empathy overlooked in leadership? I think it's because we fear empathy because it pushes us out of our comfort zone. It stretches our tolerance. And to be honest, it takes a lot of time. It takes up your time. But what I would say to encourage everybody is if you're willing to engage in that stretch and be a little bit uncomfortable and spend that little time, you end up saving yourself a lot of time in future, fixing misunderstandings, fixing disengagement, fixing broken relationships, fixing disequilibrium within yourself, that you could have otherwise had higher efficiency, productivity, better relationships, better communication. So don't shy away from doing what needs to be done for you to be more empathic, because at the end of the day, it's a win-win for you. And I think if you want to do a quick sense check of yourself, if you're in a situation and if you want to be sure, am I being empathic? Just go back to in their shoes, how would I want it? Yeah. Do unto others as you want unto you. Yeah. That would be my parting shot.
Fantastic. Oh my goodness. This has been such an awesome conversation. Every single month when we have these conversations, I just feel like the fit between the panelists is just on point. The richness of what is shared is amazing. Thank you so much to Amani, who had to leave. Thank you so much, Liz. It's really awesome to connect with you on this platform. As I said, I've been stalking you, so it's good to to connect with you. And Susan, thank you for being willing to come back again. So much has been said by my panelists. My reflections over everything that's been said are the fact that Susan, kind of ended with this idea that an investment in empathy today pays off dividends. So as with all the work we do around emotional intelligence, it's not easy and sometimes it's downright uncomfortable, but it pays off dividends. As a leader, when you invest in empathy, it will pay off dividends. Another thing that I think Liz said earlier was around setting boundaries. So empathy doesn't mean being soft. Empathy doesn't mean that you will agree with everything the others say, whether it's your team members or your friends or your family. A person who is empathic knows how to set boundaries. And when we extend empathy to others and make it clear where our boundaries are, we actually work better together. And then, something that Amani said was really around the fact that in teams, empathy is crucial. And when we extend empathy, we actually get empathy back from our teams. One of the things that came to my mind is the idea that, when we extend empathy to people, they actually give more. When we extend empathy to people, they actually give more. People are willing to give more of their discretionary effort to a leader who is empathic. So those were my takeaways from today. What a delightful conversation it has been. Diarize our next the last Wednesday of every month in the same place, 12:30 East Africa time. We'll be here again having another conversation about emotional intelligence, helping you to understand how you can leverage the power of emotional intelligence at work. Today, our conversation has been about empathy, one of the core competencies of emotional intelligence, and indeed, it has been a delightful conversation. Thanks again to my panel. Thank you very much, Susan. It's been great, as always, having you here. Thank you very much, Liz. And I can say bye to you now as I wrap up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
this was awesome.
A big thank you to Amani in absentia. So bye, guys, as I wrap up the and that's it. It's a wrap. We've come to the end of the 16th edition of the EQ Lunch and Learn. We provided the learning. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. Follow us on social media at PTS Africa across all platforms, and follow me, Mucha Mlingo, at Mucha Mlingo across all platforms so you can learn more about how you can leverage the power of emotional intelligence. Connect with us on socials as well so that you can give us your insights. Are women more empathic than men? We'll be happy to hear your thoughts on that. And that is it from me. Thank you so much for joining us. At this point, allow me to say bye-bye. Have a fabulous rest of your day and God bless you.